I'd like to welcome you all to the launch of our 5th crime anthology by the Mesdames of Mayhem. And this is what she looks like. She's a very beautiful book. You can see her behind me and Madeleine as well on we have 23 stories in this book by 22 unique authors, and they are all quite unique, as you'll find out. Many of them are here with us today. We've got Melodie Campbell, Madeleine Harris-Callway, who is our founder. We've got Jane Peterson Burfield, Rosalind Place, Catherine Astolfo, Marilyn Kay, Melissa Yee, Caro Souls, Lisa DeNicolets, Kat Mills, Madona Skaff, Blair Keetch, Cheryl Freedman, Rosemary McCracken, Ed Piwowarczyk, and we've got, I think we may have another author here, but we've also got our cover designer here, Sarah Carrick. And we want to give a big thank you to Sarah. And we count her as an honorary Mesdames because she's done all of our covers, and we've been so thrilled with them. So just to kick this off, what we're gonna do is we're gonna ask some questions and try to throw our authors off guard. This is a game of chance. We're gonna start with Melodie, who wrote the Kindred Spirits Detective Agency, which is the first story that appears in our anthology, and it's just a wonderful story. I highly recommend. That's why we put it first. The characters in this are really, really likable. And I kind of have an inside knowledge that they may be based on 2 people that we know. Loosely based, as you'll find out. Melodie, would you consider expanding these characters into a short story series, a novel, or a novella?
Oh, well, Donna, you're going to laugh at me. Some of you know that I guess it's my 4th series. The first book of my 4th series is coming out in May, The Merry Widow Murders. And the second book will be out the year after. But my agent was saying, you could write something in between. So I got this idea about 2 years ago, before we even thought of the anthology. And I wrote 30 pages of a novel and an outline, and I kicked it off to my agent. And she said, I don't know if we can combine, paranormal so much in your regular mystery market, because your regular mystery readers will be disappointed. And so I said, well, do you think maybe I should do a short story series instead with it? And she said, that's it.
Yes. Yes.
We have a partially written novel here that shows the car accident that I talk about in the beginning, and shows how they got all set up. And God knows if it'll ever be finished or published, but it isn't that funny that you would give me that question. I wasn't expecting that one.
And the thing is, the characters are just absolutely really likable. They're very, very, even though they're not realistic, they're very realistic. They're like, I know why that is. I also wanted to ask you about the Merry Widow Murders. When does the first book in that series come out?
Comes out in May. It was supposed to come out this November. Then, of course, you all heard about the paper shortage. So Cormorant said, we're probably not going to get enough, we're not able to get our printers going until the new year. So the galleys are coming out now, and galleys for review, going to bookstores and reviewers and stuff like that, libraries in the States. And the book itself won't be available till May. So I'm thinking, at first I thought, oh my God, that's another 6 months after it was supposed to be out. But now I'm saying, oh my goodness, yay, I have another 6 months to finish the second book.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your protagonist, because it's a different style of character, I think.
Yeah, that's, I'm known for loopy humor, and there is definitely humor in this book. I mean, you'll recognize it from the beginning, but there's a lot more depth in this book. Many of you know that I lost my beloved husband, Dave, 4 years ago. He died in my arms of cancer. And for a year, I was knocked over. I just, the balcony was looking like a good place to leap from. And gradually, after a year, I started to feel like I could put my writing life back together. So I started writing a book, this book, and I put in my grief. And I set it in 1929. So this is a book that takes place after World War I. There's a lot of the lost generation grief in there. Which I could speak to. Both my grandfathers were in World War I, and I knew a lot of the data from there. So I did huge research into that. So when it comes back to the short story that you'll read in our anthology, I took the same age because I'd done all this friggin' research
Yes.
into the 1920s. I was damn well going to use it again.
Sylvia can't join us, but I can tell a little bit about her story.
Okay, yes. I'm
Yes.
sorry. I forgot. I was waiting for you to ask Sylvia a question. I forgot she couldn't make it. Sorry.
Something about family and in the family, so she can't make it. She was planning to be here, but I if you know me, you know that I'm a cat fancier, and I just absolutely love Sylvia's story. Aunt Bertie tries to save the world, and there are a lot of cats in Sylvia's story, a lot of cats. A little sinister, but it's really one of Sylvia's best. She told us that she actually started this story in high school, which, of course, knowing we all know what a marvelous writer Sylvia is, so it's not surprising that to me it was a magnificent story.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that she brought it back to life and that it's in our anthology. And I'm going to hand it back to you, Donna, because I think we're
And Sylvia is working on a historical mystery novel right now that's in the editing stage.
right.
So watch for her next work, everyone. It should be really good. My question is for Caro, and it's with regards to the Yellow Bird, which is a story in our anthology in the spirit of 13. And it's a whimsical take on murder. At least that's how I feel it. It feels like it might be based on real people and situations. Can you tell us about the inspiration for it? Is it based on people you might know?
Well, funny you should ask that. Yes, it is. And I got the inspiration came to me. I found an old photo of myself and an old university friend standing outside a church, all dressed to the nines and very colorful. And I couldn't remember whether it was a wedding or a funeral we'd been at. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized I think it was actually a funeral. And it was a friend who loved bright colors. So we were both wearing bright colors and that sort of thing, which is sort of what. But anyway, we were sort of smiling and obviously it had been chatting. And I just sort of thought that there's something here. There's so much backstory to a picture like this. You know, just looking at this image, that these people have known each other for a very long time. And there's the sort of church in the background, and I don't know, it just spoke to me. So that's what gave me the idea for the story about people who sort of were at an age where they sort of did attend rather a lot of funerals. So that's where it came up from.
I felt like they were people that you could know right in the moment. So I had a sense that might be how you came up with them. You also have a standalone novel coming out soon, and I think it may be another literary work and not one of your Merculian. What is it that you're working on? Am I right on that?
Well, no, actually, I am working on another Merculian one.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Mostly because, well, it's a lot more fun. And, you know, working on literary novels gets a bit of a drudge sometimes, you know. It is a lot of work. And I thought, well, that's all very jolly and it's a good beginning. I was working on it. I thought, well, I think I just need a little Merculian excitement here. So, you know, I've written several Merculian's books since then. But the next one, which is coming out, is called High Crimes. And things get quite drastic for our Merculian characters, and Marlowe has to go wading in and sort things out. Doesn't do a terribly good job at this one because everybody is, you know, everything is very convoluted. But anyway, it should be coming out in another month or so. I'm not quite sure.
Oh, alrighty.
If anyone hasn't read any of the Merculean series, look for Marlowe, because he's really
Yes.
a delightful character. I so enjoy him.
Oh, good.
Yes.
The Merculians are a little peculiar, aren't they? The hermaphroditic planet or something?
Yes, they
yes.
are, which I now call dual gendered after somebody complained about the old fashioned word hermaphrodite.
Oh.
So I now call them, trying to keep up with the latest thing, I now call them dual gendered. But anyway, I don't know whether that's going over any better, but
Are they gender fluid or gender neutral? I mean,
well, they're not neutral at all. They're oh, no, they're really quite they quite enjoy themselves that way. Lovely.
so I think Kathy is next on our in our book, and Kathy, this is a really amazing story, The Spirit of St. Louis, because
Yes.
you work in a lot of historical detail. You work in the pilot of the St. Louis, and you also have a very strange young woman who has a lot of troubles. And without too many spoilers, can you tell us how you came up with your protagonist?
Oh, good question. The story, I was thrilled, first of all, when you and Donna had said, let's call it something to do with spirit, because that brought back that story that I had wanted to write a long time ago about the spirit of St. Louis and Charles Lindbergh, who has a connection to Renton, Ontario, which is one of those little wee towns nearby Brantford. And, if you blink, you miss it kind of town. But a woman that we were at the Simcoe Library, and she told me the story of Charles Lindbergh and the historian, and how he had helped this guy in Renton, had helped Charles Lindbergh find his ancestors, his Canadian branch. So, but then she told me the story of going to this auction and seeing this woman steal a book out of a box. Of course, I had to take that and morph it into something weird. So the woman in the veil, I have no idea really where she came from, except that having her dressed that way seemed to me to be in those times, and even in these times, a kind of odd way of dressing to go to an auction with you're a black veil and a black dress and black shoes and so on. So I thought, okay, this would be a way also to have one of the clues that happen later on, because her face is covered, so you can't tell her age, can't tell anything about her. And then of course my protagonist is, she's a psychopath. So, yeah. But you don't know that at first, I hope. At least that's the way I wrote it, hoping that people wouldn't know that, they would think she was somewhat normal. And then, of course, as things progress, you start to say, oh, she's a little strange. And but I had a great time with it, because I wanted to add that humor too. So, I got to look up strange things that have been auctioned off. And so I got to, auction off a used hanky and some underwear, and which I had to say belonged to Arthur Ellis, because why not? so I had a good laugh putting those things together too, and drawings on fungi. That was another thing that gets auctioned off apparently quite often. So I had a good time adding the humor to balance that really dark scenario of the crazy woman and the weird veiled woman, and how this all centered on Charles Lindbergh.
It's true, isn't it, that truth is often stranger than fiction, isn't it? And the things like the fungi, drawing on fungi, I thought you made that up, but that turns out to be true. And even worse, people will pay for it. Wow.
Yeah. Apparently so. Yeah.
But you know, I can really see the house, like when you, in your description of where the auction's taking place in the story, I can really see the house, and setting's very important to you and your work. And in your latest novel, which is The Grand Art of Murder, the setting is again very important. And why did you, can you tell us a little bit about your book and about your setting for it?
It's actually set in Brantford, in and around Brantford. I went back and forth with this one, whether I was going to set it in the United States or whether I was going to set it in Canada. In the end, I felt I had to set it close to home. And what was closer than the city that I live in? So, but I always have to add something a little odd. So I needed a little village, and I made up the village that's next door to Brantford. There is really no village. I mean, there are some, but not this one. And of course, it's idyllic in some ways, except that people get killed, but murdered left, right, and center. Other than that, it's a normal little town. But I had a great time with this novel because my protagonist's mother is her ghost, and the ghost says all the things that you would not say out loud.
Love to say.
She says them. And of course only my protagonist can hear her, but I had a blast, dressing her in different outfits and making her say outrageous things. So that was fun. I'm going to do a sequel to that one for sure, based at it's called the Glenhurst Art Gallery, and they were haunted at one time. So I'm gonna go there, and
we'll look forward to that, definitely.
Yeah, I'll just get around it. Well, first I have one novel to finish, and then I'll start on that one. So if I would just get myself to sit in the chair and get to work.
I know that you travel a lot.
Yeah.
I've got a question for Rosemary McCracken, but before I get there, I just want to give a shout out to our son Thomas and Coralie, and they've got our brand new granddaughter there with Lady. If they can just wave. You've all heard me talk about going to Newfoundland to
A new
family. Sandra, named after my husband, I'm going to say. I may not be right, but I'm going to claim it anyway. Good to see you guys. And now for Rosemary. Rosemary has a story in the Spirit of 13 titled The Fur Coat Conundrum. And the story is loosely based or inspired by Rosemary's life as a journalist back in the bad old days in Montreal. And my question for you is not really about your story, except in how it pertains to life as a female journalist in those days. What can you tell us about that, Rosemary?
Life as a female journalist in those days. Well, it wasn't, this story was set in, I think it was 78. It actually says it in the first paragraph. I just can't read. The late 70s. I believe it was 78. And I was a young journalist at the time at the Montreal Star. And it was a pretty, it was a pretty equalitarian time. I know people that were around a few decades before. The women covered the, wrote in the women's pages, and they covered cat shows and dog shows and wrote about recipes and that. But no, we were doing all sorts of things. We were writing about labor and, Montreal's big union town. So lots of that kind of stuff. And actually there were no women police reporters at that time. It just happened, there were a police desk with 4 people on it, and none of them were women. But my character, who was based on me, was a young general reporter at that time. Your first job, you'd be writing about everything. So I had the lovely assignment, and in reality, it really happened. I was assigned, most publications have a forecast for the new year. They run on the New Year's Eve. the predictions. And so I was told to get predictions from the great beyond. And I interviewed a psychic, and I went to his home, just like in the story. And this man, which I didn't put in the story, this psychic actually told me something that was going to happen to me, important event in my life that was going to take place the next month in January. And it's not in the story, but he said, be careful, maybe reconsider. And I didn't put that in the story. So he really, I think this guy did have psychic powers, although my character was a little bit skeptical of him when she met him.
Yeah, no, I knew it was loosely based on you. That's why I wanted to ask it that way, because we talked about it before. You've got a book coming out in 2023, and it's going to be your 5th Pat Tierney mystery.
No. It's there's no date. I'm writing it. I don't think it will be ready in this coming year. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it have a working title?
It doesn't have a working title. No. It's my 5th Pat Tierney book, and Pat Tierney's my intrepid financial planner character, a woman not based loosely on me, but in this one, she actually one of the main characters is a journalist, and so Pat delves for the first time into the newspaper world. So it's been fun because it's bringing back. It's set right now in 2023 or whatever this year is, but it's not based way back when in the 70s, and Pat does a lot of this stuff she doesn't know. She doesn't know newspaper life. This is a character. This is a client of hers who was a columnist in a Toronto newspaper, and so she gets to know this and gets to be introduced to this world.
For those who aren't familiar with the Pat Tierney series, it's a really wonderful series. It's very realistic. Pat Tierney is a financial planner who encounters crimes of various sorts throughout her career. And tell us some of the titles. I know we've got Safe Harbor, Blackwater, Raven Lake, and
Uncharted Waters. They're all very watery titles.
Very watery titles.
Yeah, so I'll have to come up with a 5th watery title. So I don't have it yet.
Water under the
very
bridge.
worth reading. If you want to check them out, they're very worth reading. So look for those. The Pat Tierney Mystery Series by Rosemary McCracken. So Madeleine gets a break from asking questions for a second. Madeleine's story in our anthology is titled Amdur's Ghost, and it's loosely based on your time, Madeleine, working for the ministry. Can you tell us any true stories without names of the kind that make you laugh? Because you do get your Amdur into a lot of funny scrapes.
That's true. It's been a veritable goldmine of funny stories. I mean, it's again, like we were saying earlier, if you tell the truth, nobody's going to believe it. And I don't know if you remember the Wayback Machine. There used to be a British comedy called Yes Minister. And the 2 times you wrote it, said you have to make it up. They just documented their time in bureaucracy, and it just became this hit comedy series, and nobody could believe the absurdity.
But it was true.
It's really fun and comical.
Yes.
Well, of course, they say write what you know. So Amdur was actually the character of my very first novel that lives in a drawer. And I was very sad to leave him there. It almost got published, but not quite. And so he came to life in an earlier story, our very first anthology called Amdur's Cat. And that is a true story there, actually, which is about when the Mike Harris government took over. I was at that time working as an IT consultant at OHIP. And when the new government comes in, the deputy minister comes and does a big tour, and usually, they come with an entourage, and it's very formal. They do a trot around the offices, and everybody has lunch, and then they go back. So my friend James Jack was sitting in an office, and everybody's all dressed up in a suit, which is not how people usually work. Because the deputy minister was coming, everybody's dressed up and they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And where is the deputy minister? Nobody knows. So finally, my friend Dave Austin was sent to go look for him. So he goes downstairs. So the OHIP building in Kingston is half owned by the courts and half owned by OHIP. So they went down and they asked the security guard if they've seen anybody. Well, the guy did come by, but we don't really know what he wants. So we thought he wanted his health card. So we sent him to the office to get his health card. So it turned out the deputy minister was dressed like such a bum. The security guard wasn't sure whether he was there to go to court or not. But he was asking for the Ministry of Health. So they used the OHIP office. So Dave retrieved him. Very embarrassing. I come out to the office, and then the guy, it turned out, had run a fish camp. And so his first thing is he had a real hostility for civil servants. And so he started off by saying, you know, where I come from, we stab from the front. To which my friend James said, no problem, you come to the right place. That is a true story. And I didn't put that in Amdur's cat. In Amdur's Ghost, I have another story which actually happened. I worked in the public health branch for almost a decade. And one of the things we had to deal with was rabies. Oh. And there was an incident where these people were trapped. These people did get trapped by a rabid coyote. Yeah, no, that's it. So these people actually did get trapped in a car by a rabid coyote, and I use that in my story. And this is a second story with Amdur as a character called Amdur's Ghost.
Yes, because Amdur there actually is a coyote that traps one of the characters. That's right. You also currently work on. You're currently working on a story called Diner, which I think is a little noir, as a lot of your work is quite noir. And you've also got a ghost story novella underway. Can you tell us about those two things?
Sure. And I just, I love noir, and that's really my preference for writing. And I find that what happens is people feel I sort of stray into horror with those. It's like the one that I wrote about the snakes. But yeah, and so Diner is a game starring one of my characters in a previous story, Terry Snow, who is an older woman driver, and she was in the anthology which came out west called The Dame Was Trouble, and the story is called The Seeker. But it was a wonderful anthology of noir written by Canadian women and starring women protagonists, which I highly recommend. Came out by a small press called Coffin Hop Press. I highly recommend. There's amazing stories in there. And yeah, I'm writing a ghost story. I just thought it'd be sort of fun to stray into another genre. Actually, many of us in the group actually write in several genres, not just in crime. So why not? I get to talk to Madonna. Madonna, where are you?
Mhm.
There you are.
Yes.
Okay. And Madonna, I really love your character, Lenny, and he's the little small-time crook who discovers he actually does have psychic abilities. So how did you come up with Lenny, and how did he appear to you?
Well, I guess the story here, Moving On, is actually a sequel to some story, The Soul Behind the Face, in your previous anthology, in the Key of 13. So stories based on music. And so the title, The Soul Behind the Face, is actually from, oh my goodness, Scorpion. It's a heavy metal group, but it's really a beautiful song. So anyways, I was thinking about that. Then I had been reading some stuff about psychics and fake psychics. And then we actually went to Sudbury and were visiting with my brother-in-law, who works as a tech at the University of Laurentian. And he had built a little helmet that you put on. You can watch, monitor different brain waves and stuff. And so he was saying that, they were using it to try and debunk some psychics. And he says, well, I don't believe in it, but a few of them, I had to think about it. So that started playing in my head, and I developed the character of the Great Leonard. And so he sees this experiment that's going on in some hick town in northern Ontario. He couldn't resist. And of course he gets debunked. And I did name the tech that debunked him Stanley, after my brother-in-law. And so, after he discovers that in this story, I'm not going to tell you, so I don't want to blow anything for people, spoilers. So he discovers he really is psychic, and he decides, well, the great Leonard, that's over. He's going back to plain old Lenny. And so a murder victim comes to him to help him solve his murder, the murder victim's murder. And so in this story, moving on, again, he's asked by, well, it's actually kind of falls into it to try and figure out how a ghost was murdered. And the thing is, from there, like, it was just one thing after another that just kept getting thrown into the story. And so I was trying to have a critique group, and I had various characters, and they kept guessing who the ghost was. So, I said, aha, I'm going to just get them all. And I changed it, and I think they still guessed, but well. So, and actually, I wasn't really thinking of anything, but when you came up with the new anthology, I thought, oh, I had been thinking of some kind of sequel for Lenny, because I really like him. And
yeah. Great character. Now you're going to be talking about short stories at the Maple Leaf Mystery Conference, which is a virtual mini conference coming up in Ottawa. And Melissa, I believe you're there as well. And if you could tell us a little bit about this upcoming conference.
Okay. Well, our panel is called Get Shorty, and it's at 9:30 in the morning. And we're going to be talking about short fiction, and it's all Canadian authors. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Oh, well, my question's for Blair, and it's with regards to his story To Catch a Kumiho, which in the spirit of 13, and it's really just a wonderful story, and it involves Korean mythology. How did you land on that particular mythology for your story, Blair?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks very much for coming out to the virtual launch. It's great to see everyone. And yes, the inspiration for the story was very close to home. I'm married to a very wonderful lady who is South Korean, and one of the things that I found out, and also with our young son, just reading various Korean stories, I thought, okay, I'll explore the mythology and come up with one of the characters to be in the story from Korean mythology. And I started hearing about the Kumiho, which is a nine-tailed fox, which often disguises itself as a beautiful and seductive woman, but whose goal is to eat the heart and the liver of the men that are attracted to her. Now, fortunately, my wife is beautiful and very attractive.
She's not a Kumiho.
But she's not a Kumiho. At least not. I haven't discovered that yet. But it was a fun story to write, because it does sort of marry Korean mythology with your typical private eye. And the fact of the matter is, for a lot of this story, and I would even say towards the end, you don't really know if she's a Kumiho or she's pretending to be a Kumiho, or other people are viewing her in that way. So it was a lot of fun playing with the perception of various characters in the story. And
yeah, no, I love the way that the mythology in that just rolls out. It's really beautifully done. You've got to have done a fair bit of research on that. You've got a novel in development right now, I happen to know, titled Flight Risk. As long as the title hasn't changed, I think
no.
You had. Are you ready to share any details on that?
Yeah, that actually has been a work in progress for more than a couple of years now. I have to admit, I was a little derailed by COVID on that. Like everyone else, certainly our lives have been impacted by COVID, but for the story itself, it involves a lot of travel, and the protagonist is hired to find out why someone who they thought the wife thought was in Las Vegas, and then there's a plane crash the other side of the world in Thailand, and her husband is one of the victims of the plane crash. So she hires a private detective, and there's sort of double lives and things like that. But a lot of the book involved travel, going from place to place, and when COVID hit, it just wasn't realistic. And I was struggling because, you know, no one knew what the world was going to look like, and to a great extent we're still trying to figure out what the new normal is. But I have started working that in the past few months, and I would say maybe 3/4 of the way through. But as you know, I also have a 6-year-old, so and a full-time job, so like a lot of it.
We need Lenny to give us a
time.
projection on this, right,
Yes.
Madonna?
But I do feel far more comfortable now moving forward with this story, because for a while everything was in limbo, because, you know, some countries you weren't allowed to visit for a while, and I was kind of grappling with that. And I know a few short stories, a lot of authors are still grappling with the impact of COVID to their writing. I had submitted one short story for a completely different anthology where I did reference COVID, and the editor came back and said, no, don't mention COVID at all. Pretend it doesn't exist. But when you read, I'll give Michael Connolly as an example with his Ballard and Warsh books. You know, the latest books were very much, you know, the characters would go places and put on their masks and go about their investigation. So, you know, there's sort of differing thoughts on what that looks like. So, but I'm back on track as much as I can be with the 6-year-old.
Cheryl, you have written a really interesting story about a Dybbuk. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the mythology behind this character.
A Dybbuk is a wandering soul, it's a person who has committed some sort of sin in life and is condemned to wander the earth until that sin is expiated. And so the story actually, I started it in 1995 when I was taking a science fiction fantasy writing course at George Brown. And the whole beginning of the story is from that. I just didn't have an ending to it. This Dybbuk, Shlomo Finkel, comes to a woman who is living in the same house that he lived in. He lived in the house in the 1930s. She lived in the house in the 2020s. And Sarah, the protagonist, who lives in this house, is actually based on me, and it's my house in Kensington Market. And Shlomo Finkel needs Sarah to help him solve the crime that he committed so he can finally go to his rest. And so she does it. Now, the thing is that I'm working on a book that which has Shlomo Finkel in it again. A Dybbuk is usually considered a malevolent spirit, but there are also Dybbuks that are considered helpful spirits, and they can be summoned. And Sarah will summon him by lying on his grave. This is something that was actually done by 15th century Kabbalists. So that's where he came from, because I thought it would be fun. And there's a ferret in it, of course.
That's great. That's great. So, Cheryl, are you working on crime fiction or speculative fiction these days, or fantasies? Because you write
the book is both. The book involves demons.
Demons, all right.
And it involves there's a Jewish concept of the Lamed Vavniks. It's the 36 righteous, well, they were men, but let's call them righteous people, upon whom the survival of the earth depends. And but you have to have 36 in each generation. There are only 35 in this generation, and the 36th is yet to be born. but there's a faction of demons who don't want the 36th to be born and let the world go to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions for Ed about the haunting of Mississippi Belle. Your story throws me right back to the golden era of film. I'm wondering how, I know that you're a movie buff. Maybe movie buff is too quiet of a term for how you take it. Can you tell us about your research in this area of film and how it lends into your story?
Well, I was thinking, the theme of spirits and ghosts, you think of hauntings. And then there have been certain movies that have been considered haunted or cursed. You think of The Crow with Brandon Lee, for example. So I thought, well, if I do something like that, and then I'd also come across this reference to, I have the narrator of my story is this guy who's a so-called fixer, has a fancy title, but basically he's there to make sure there's no bad publicity attached to anyone associated with the studio. And there really was at least one guy like this. His name's Eddie, the real life guy's name is Eddie Mannix. And so I thought, okay, a guy like him could fit in with this. And then the other thing I thought, well, how people are always rivals, actors or actresses are rivals for parts. And what if that rivalry just got out of hand? And there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you've worked for newspapers as well. I don't know if that's how you met Rosemary or not, which is not really question. Is it?
Yeah, way back in university days.
We were at a student newspaper.
We were at a student newspaper together.
Okay. So this
a university newspaper.
This is a long time venture then. My story for you is actually about your time editing for newspapers and how you've morphed that into editing for fiction. And can you tell us a little bit about your work in that?
Well, copy editing is, that started out in newspapers as copy editing, and that's where you kind of learn that, you got to keep things tight. Like you can't be wandering. I used to write fairly long at one point early in my reporting days, but then I learned, okay, I have to cut back because there's only so much space. And then you try, and that brought in the idea of like you learn about all the things like you have to do as an editor. You learn about keeping things tight, punctuation, grammar, and accuracy. Making sure your facts are right. Because that all comes into play. And so.
For anyone who doesn't know, Ed does pretty much all of the copy edit work, although Rosemary's helped sometimes too. For our
He's a big help.
Yes, I know that. Thank you. And also way back in the day, I didn't know Ed until Rosemary, till he started joining Rosemary in the crime fiction crowd. But I knew him peripherally because I worked at Southam in the Southam days, and I would see Ed barreling up the stairs in the atrium at 1450 Don Mills Road to go to his job at the National Post, and then barreling back out with you always had a rucksack on your back, and I assume it was full of editing work, but
no, the editing work I left behind at the office.
So I only knew you peripherally until Rosemary and you started appearing together. I knew Rosemary much longer. Yeah.
Okay. I guess our next person is Kat, who, and Kat, so I'm delighted to tell everyone, if you didn't know this already, that this is Kat's debut crime fiction story, and she writes a very sinister dollhouse in this, and I wonder how you came up with the story, and the dollhouse in particular.
Yeah, it was actually a family friend we went to visit in Nova Scotia, and she had this big house and a bounding dog and this beautiful, massive dollhouse that was actually hooked up to the electricity, so all the windows would light up, and it was very detailed. Yeah, it was really cool. And yeah, she had it on display, and it was kind of this point of pride, and it was I don't know, I guess you see something like that and your brain just starts meandering.
Yeah.
It was also, her house was like right near this beautiful port. And at night it would just fill with fog and you'd look at the windows and see all the street lamps. Like it was very kind of spooky and sinister. So naturally, you know, your brain starts going down dark places, I think, or maybe not naturally, mine did.
And you have been very busy. You produced 2 wonderful documentaries. We have Me, Mahmood, and the Mint Plant, which has been playing at a variety of film festivals. And you also have a recent, which has been widely recognized, called The Billboard Squad. And can you tell us a bit more about what's happening with your films right now? And
yeah, so those 2 are both Me, Mahmood, and the Mint Plant. They're both on YouTube. So that was the CBC short. So you can actually see that short docs on Gem as well as YouTube. And the Billboard Squad was Al Jazeera. So that's on their website as well as YouTube. So they're just kind of doing the festival circuit right now. We finished them at the same time. They both started around the same time. So they're making their way and my brain is recovering. And I'm also heavily pregnant. So I think that's going to be the next thing that comes as I figure out, you know, research for other films. But so I might take a wee little break.
yeah.
Congratulations, Kat.
What is the
I'm going to post the links to Kat's, those 3 videos that we mentioned when I do the show notes for this launch. And so watch for that. And I'll be sure to send the link out to everybody. And I'm going to be putting links for a lot of our Mesdames on there. And I'll definitely include those 3 videos as well, the YouTube links. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. And I think, Donna, you're next on the list here, which is...
Yeah.
And Donna has written, and talk about noir, one of the more sinister stories in the collection. And ink is used in a very dark way in your story. And could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah. When I think of ink, there's we all know about India ink, which would be quite blue, but I think of black ink and just the imagery of ink. You think of ink spilling, a writer, and ink is spilling on a page, and it's just blotting out things. It just, a very little ink, it's like a very little blood. It gets into everything and it's impossible to get out. So, you know, it kind of lends itself to staining and the concept of evil and the concept of being overtaken. Now, my protagonist in Beloved Ink is a writer. So, of course, he understands the power of ink very well. And his soulmate is a tattoo artist. So she also understands the power of ink very well. And I think they both, as you'll learn, understand the power of evil and what it means, and how people who look very ordinary and who are going about lives can be actually very evil if you scratch the surface and check out their ink, you know.
So as we all know, of course, Donna is our publisher, but you have also published a new crime thriller series by Rick Mafina, who is a well-known internationally best-selling author. And could you tell us a little bit about that series, Donna?
Yes, I can. And I have no shame about plugging Rick Mafina because he is a wonderful, wonderful writer and a true gentleman. And if he ever comes in and signs into this, he'll know my true feelings. His latest trilogy may be some of his best work yet. Each one is a novella length, so they capture you and they carry you really quickly. They are the Ray Wyatt thriller trilogy, if you're trying to look for them. The first book in the series, in the trilogy, is, and of course it's going to just go from me right now. The second one is The Hollow Place, and the third one is Requiem. And they're all just absolutely beautiful books. They're beautiful to look at. They're beautiful to read. So I highly recommend them. Rick's one of quite a number of authors that I work with, but Ed and I worked with him quite recently, and I'm very proud of this trilogy. So I'm happy to talk about it. Thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah.
Well, now, Melissa, are you hypothermic yet?
Melissa's next on our list. So I'm gonna ask Melissa about the mob. And Melissa is going to smile because I said it correctly.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it.
I had quite a struggle with it before. I was telling Madeleine about that. Maybe I shouldn't have this question because I'm sure to really just screw that up. Anyway, in the mob, see, I said it again. Your protagonist, Dr. Hope C. and her friend Tucker, they also appear in your critically acclaimed Dr. Hope C. medical series. How did this character come to you, and does she draw on your personal experiences working in ER?
Oh, well, this is an easy question for me. Okay, yeah. So as you're saying, I'm an emergency physician, and I don't know, when I was doing my residency in Montreal, and people were, as we know, being stuck in the emergency room and piling up in the hallways and stuff, just waiting for admission, that sort of thing, my mind was just thinking subconsciously about murder. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was a doctor who could not only save lives the way we're all taught to do, but also could solve crime and find killers. And I think maybe subconsciously it's something that we can solve and fight, because as we all know, fighting a virus or bacteria is not always gratifying, but you know, if you can put somebody in jail, that's always a good time. So I really enjoy writing about Hope and Tucker and her other people too. And in this case, actually, the mob bar.
Yeah, it's really.
I was just going to say that is based on the mob bar, the mob museum in Las Vegas. That's the informal name for it. I don't remember the actual name for it, but you can go in there, and one of the famous things they have is the wall from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, some millionaire bought it and then for some reason donated it to the museum. So, and they've circled the bullet holes and stuff, and so you can go up to see it. But I'll just tell a quick story from that, which is that one of the things that touched me was they said this was the only survivor from the massacre, and it was a picture of a dog. So I had stopped by that because I love dogs.
Oh.
And so there was a dog who was present when this went down, and the dog was the only one they didn't kill, but unfortunately he was so messed up that he didn't live that much longer afterwards. I'm sorry to say, but at the time, at least they spared him at the time, I guess I would say.
Okay.
And there were also there was a lot of stuff about the mafia and gangs, and I thought it was also interesting. I spent time talking about the government, people who are fighting them, and how they had this sort of losing PR war because a lot of people liked Al Capone and other people because they would just come out and hand out $100 bills during the Depression. So they're like, oh, those are really good guys, even though they're actually. Yeah. So the government made, among other things, they made comic books, calling them G-Men, to make them seem more exciting and dashing and trying to attract people to working for the government instead of working for the mob. So I thought when I was actually there for a romance writing workshop, and I was like, it would be great to have a bar with it. They do have a bar in the basement. I didn't stay for it, but they have like a speakeasy in the basement basically. And I was like, whoa, it would be perfect to have a story set here. And theirs is like, it's in the basement. It's like a bomb shelter almost. That might even be the name of it or something, so it's concrete and it's not beautiful, but it is grim. So the people who are going there like it. And then there are lots of beautiful touches like the wood and the light and everything like that. So I had Hope and Tucker go to a mob bar in Montreal because that's where they're based.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it triggered a chord with me because one of my very, very early unpublished works, they spend a lot of time in a speakeasy. So I really did like that aspect.
Yeah.
Of it. Very caperish. But tell us about The Shapes of Wrath. When is it coming out?
February 1st. So I had a Kickstarter for it. And those people should be getting their copies in the next month, I think, or hoping before Christmas. But otherwise, it comes for the rest of the world, February 1st. And Hope will
Number
be
is that
tackling
in
the 7
Hope's
deadly sins.
series? What number is that now, The Shapes of Wrath?
Oh, but it's a new series. So
It's a
there'll
new
be a new
series.
series for the 7 deadly sins. So the first book is about anger or wrath. And there'll be 7 books in this series to cover the 7 sins.
Okay, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I
Yeah,
really like that. Very good.
Okay, well, I guess Marilyn is our next author. And Marilyn, your story, Rise Up, is about an evil cult. And there's been quite a few of those in the news in recent times. And next year, I think they even have a true crime story about. And so I'm interested in why you and how you chose this setting and community for your story.
Well, actually, it was partly my daughter who suggested it. My daughter Moira. I'll give her a shout out. But I've been for how many years now? 5 years. I've been working on a novel about extremism. As my daughter said, you've been researching this kind of stuff, so why not write about it? So I did a lot more research on cults themselves and found really interesting things about them. And there's some great things on YouTube. There's several on, the whole evangelical thing of speaking in tongues and stuff like that. And then there were some actual cults that were on YouTube that I watched. And of course, Netflix, my daughter's been watching documentaries on the various cults that have come up in, and so I thought, why not? So that's where I got it from. And but what I did was I wrote it from the point of view of a child, and because children often see the truth. They're looking at black and white.
Yes.
And whereas her mother is very twisted. Her mother has swallowed everything. But it's interesting now that looking at what they're doing with the Freedom Convoy, the whole inquiry. And I just read an article about how the convoy people were in an alternate reality. They were talking about how everybody was loving and and everything was just wonderful. And there's no way you could change them very easily. So anyway, that's what I wanted. I like to write about things that are very topical, and cults are very topical.
Yes, I would say so. And is this are they the subject of the novel that you're working on right now?
Well, actually, it's extremism, and I have right-wing extremism is the main, but there is some left-wing extremism, and and I give sort of equal play. I mean, I know that most novels, if they're going to write about terrorism, they write about Islamic terrorism. So this is about domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
But, fair play. We have a little bit of everything in there in terms of the, there are some Muslim who are sort of on the edge of extremism too, but it's really basically about domestic terrorism and how it is groomed and how people really fall into it. And then, of course, there's the murders and the bombings. And so my detective is very, very busy, shall we say.
Very busy, yeah.
And when do you, I think there's an agent who's interested in it, you said, and
There is, I don't know whether she's still going to be interested in it. I met her at a romance conference in Toronto, and I talked to her twice about it on successive years, and then COVID came, and so I don't know whether she's still going to be interested in it, but I'm going to send it to her quite soon. I'm just working to make it really cleaned up with some help from a very good friend,
yes,
namely Cheryl.
Cheryl, we know who you are.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Jane, you have set your mystery on a cruise ship, which is also very topical. Hopefully not the one with the 800 COVID patients.
Yes.
Oh, I know.
But this one, this cruise ship is haunted. But what about a cruise ship setting really inspired your thoughts of murder?
I miss travel. I miss being able, I was a peripatetic soul. I was always off somewhere or coming home from somewhere. And I've been enjoying my time sort of anchored down for a while, but I used it as an excuse to have to do a lot of research on YouTube on cruising. And cruise, I was taken on a transatlantic cruise for the first time when I was 7, I think it was. And I was fascinated, terrorized by the giant pistons I was taken down to the engine room. So I've been madly in love with the whole experience, terrified when a pelican plucked a piece of bread out of my hand when I was trying to feed the seagulls. You know, we would go and visit the animals that were in kennels on deck, because they, you know, just you know, as to a 7-year-old, it was a remarkable world. So I thought, what a wonderful way to escape COVID lockdown. I actually did write a story on COVID for another one of our anthologies, and I wrote it at the time because in March or April, everybody sort of thought it would be over by early fall. The book came out as usual, late October, and we were really locked down. So I didn't want to sort of actively mention COVID in this one, but it was my reaction to COVID.
And it was titled Masked, and it featured a victory garden.
Yes, yes, yes. Can I just say how delighted I am to be included in a group that has so many interesting people in it. My Lord.
Yes.
Anyway.
Same here.
Well, Jane, your characters, you like to take people who are seemingly ordinary, but hiding and seemingly living ordinary lives. And there are circumstances that sort of operating beneath the idyllic surface. So tell us what this intrigues you about this.
I think anybody is capable of murder given the right circumstances. This is for Kat. I remember after my first child was born, I had her in a seat, you know, in the car, and I was driving down Church Street. And as I was driving, I was estimating what I would do if somebody came out and threatened to carjack me, and what I would do to kill them so Miranda would be safe. This just shows you the extremists that you're going to be going to shortly. I think anybody is. I know everybody's probably heard this at least 4 times too many, but in 1973, I was part of a Canadian YMCA delegation to a world conference in Uganda, where we were entertained by Idi Amin and his many wives and concubines. And we were there for 10 days. It was a very long time to feel under threat. And Idi Amin was the silliest looking person. He came to the conference dressed in a leopard skin. He used to come up to our hotel nobody in our group would go into the swimming pool because it was green with algae and we don't know what else. And he would happily go in there and splash about so he could show off his body. And yet this man who was so silly looking and was anything but benign. So, you know, you don't know what's under the surface of anybody. So I'm always interested in finding ways to sort of explore that.
My question was, in a faint disturbance of hope, what kind of occurred to me is that you're moving more and more toward the poetic prose with your last number of stories. And you're very, very good at it. I get the sense that you've got some of the poetic in your background. Is that true?
Yeah, I suppose maybe a little bit. I wrote poetry was sort of the first, well, not the first thing I wrote, but yeah, when I was much younger, I dabbled anyway.
Because the story, it doesn't encumber the story in any way. The story moves along beautifully, but it's just the imagery in specific words and phrases that anybody who reads your recent few stories is going to notice that there is definitely a poetic prose bent in it. You know, you also set your stories in oddball times and places. Some are in the future, some are in the past, some are in current day, but in sort of a fictionalized or fantasized reality. How do you hop about mentally from space to space in these different stories and times and settings?
I really don't know. It just seems to, something comes, you know, and it's kind of in its time already when I get the idea, I suppose. I think the one before this, in our last anthology, I knew I wanted to do something completely different. I wanted to try something completely different. So I started in sort of an alternate time or a future time, hopefully not a future time, but an alternate time anyway. And this one that I just wrote for this anthology certainly was something that I thought about for quite some time. I think I mentioned in the book that I have this very small black and white photograph of my grandparents' house in England in the 30s. And you can see the tape crisscrossing their glass windows in the background. And it's such an evocative image that, yeah, it just kind of, you know, you see something and it sticks in your mind and you know there's something you want to write.
A lot of
it, and it does seem to have a bit of a eerie feel to it. That's not really the right word, but something kind of spiritual is in there.
A lot of your research kind of pertains and draws on the World War II era England, doesn't it? And I think you're working on a longer piece right now that may involve some of that research. Is that true?
Set in World War II, no, this was the one standalone story that I did. Set in that time, yeah.
So Lisa, this story is set in the time of apartheid in South Africa. And can you tell us, a little bit about how that influenced your story and also about the peculiar demon that is part of your story?
Yeah, that would be the Tokolosh. And I really wanted to write about the Tokolosh for a really long time. And this story had kind of been brewing in my head. And I also really wanted to write about what it was like growing up as a child during apartheid. I think it's something that, you know, if you grow up during something like that, you always grapple with the guilt of it, even if you were very, you know, young at the time. And so the story was very important for me to write. I think it's something that, you know, you don't want the evils of the past to be forgotten, because it's kind of like how one, not how you atone, but it's maybe how you prevent things like that from happening again. You know, and the Tokolosh, I mean, he's such a great evil little creature. Basically, a Tokolosh is a little demon, and he enters through any of your orifices, your nose, your ears, your mouth while you're sleeping, and then he you know, takes over your body and does whatever he wants. So, you know, it's not a happy ending, shall we say. But But this story I really enjoyed writing.
Yeah. And you have a book coming out and a book.
The book, let me try and move it so it's in the screen. It's called Everything You Dream Is Real, and it is currently available. It's speculative fiction, and so far the reviewers have really embraced it, which is a relief because it's quite weird. I have my book launch this Thursday, actually, which kind of is bad timing because I know that the Sisters in Crime are interviewing Anthony Bedolka, so a lot of our sisters won't be at the launch, but I'll have other events as well that people can come to. I'm going to be at the High Root Ethiopian restaurant on the 2nd of December, which would be, so if friends want to come out then, that would be amazing. The Ethiopian food is just absolutely my favorite, so come out for the food if nothing else, and it'll be a nice evening. So yeah, lots of events coming up.
Excellent, excellent.
That's Everything You Dream Is Real by Lisa DeNicolets, who is the author of In a Land of Fear and Denial in our anthology. And Lisa's the last author in the anthology that we're talking to today. Congratulations on your upcoming book. I can't wait until we can share the link to it, and hopefully it has great success. But I also had a question for Sarah Carrick. I see Sarah Carrick here. So my question for Sarah, who is just an extraordinary book cover designer and graphic artist in general, this is just a lame question, but it's one that should be, for you, very easy to answer. But for me, it's just really difficult. How do you come up with these ideas? Because I struggle and struggle and struggle. I will know what I want to see, but it never comes out that way, ever. So when you're pairing a story with a cover image, what goes through your mind?
A lot of things. Just usually the title, first thing. A description helps. So getting input from yourself, Madeleine, the rest of the authors, all having input into what direction helped fill in what the book was about, because I had different ideas. I'll take things literally. And so my book flying around and now it looks like a Halloween book. And then I went more into, I think I had a bottle of spirits.
Yeah, that was a beautiful one.
And I wasn't even really, I had something else in my mind. So I'm trying to figure out what the stories all encapsulate, and can I do it justice to these wonderful stories, which, by the way, I've started reading them, and they are enthralling. They really are. They just thank
you.
They're so wonderfully, creative, and I wanted the cover to represent that and capture, a person scrolling by on the website's eye immediately, and they just I gotta say, I'm going to be haunted by some of these wonderfully dark stories. Probably all of them I'm going to be haunted by, because they're just so fantastic. And I just want to represent this wonderful creative group that's what I'm hoping is to capture people, to bring them in. I'm the Barker. The cover's the Barker.
Yeah.
Roll up and see what's inside. You won't believe your imagine. You won't believe your mind or what your eyes do behold. And that's
when we started out with our very first anthology, 13. Who knew we'd be 5 books into this? But right off the bat, we kind of went with the color purple, because the color purple is one of those colors. I mean, it can be spring, it can be fall. You see it both times. So it can be the beginning and the end. It can be very sweet color. It's a very innocent color, but it can also be not so much. You think of purple as the color of royalty. It's the color of, it can be the color of demons, So we've kind of stayed with that color. But of all your covers to date, and they've all been brilliant, I think this, in my personal opinion, is your best. I mean, I just loved it the moment I saw it. And it was just overwhelmingly a favorite of all our authors. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Unanimous. It's
Very
absolutely,
lucky.
which is awesome. We vote on all our covers, so as we are an autonomous collective, and it works. But this was unanimous, so this was really easy for us to get behind. And it's our 10th anniversary, which is coming up, which is hard to believe that since Donna and I sat down to lunch 10 years ago, how fast time goes. Like it's just absolutely amazing. And we couldn't have done this without all your support. And thank you very much, everyone. You've been the best team, absolutely. And this is our 5th anthology. Can you believe it? When we look up, we have tangible proof of our success because it's our 5th book. And we look up on the shelves and there are 5 books sitting there, and we're in the library. And we have a documentary made about us. we're on YouTube, It's unbelievably awesome. We had, thanks to Sylvia, we had amazing publicity. We got a full page in the Toronto Star this year. And if you don't have the link already, just either email Donna or me and we'll be happy to give it to you. And so next year, we're going to be doing what writers do best, which is writing. And what we're going to do to celebrate is to put up mid-month one story, and we're asking from the anthologies, from the first 4 anthologies. So we're asking all our authors to pick their favorite story out of the first 4 anthologies, and with their permission, we'll be reproducing the story in full mid-month, and for all our readers to see what we can do, and to go back and read the rest of the stories in our book, and also the rest of the work of that particular author, which is great. So thank you very much again, and over to you, Donna.
Well, I just want to take a moment to thank all of the folks who've attended. I see Tammy there. I've seen Tom and Ted for doing the wonderful technical work for us. Thank you very much. And to all our guests who've joined us, thank you for joining us for this time. And I want to thank our authors because, they're sort of the unsung heroes, the people who write these stories and come at it from so many different angles. There's no right or wrong angle to approach crime fiction. We've got Melodie, who always tells a funny story, although some of her stories lately is funny. Some of them are a little darker. We've got Jane, who goes into that sort of quiet suburban housewife. We've got Lisa, who comes at it from an almost vivid kind of an approach. And I can't mention everybody, but just to give you that idea that we all come at it with our own unique flavor of crime. And if you don't believe it, delve into any of our anthologies. I'm so proud of this latest one. I really could not be more proud. Thank you all for coming.
Dusty road, man alone. His vital signs go on hold, and I don't know what you've been told, but the years have turned my eyes gold. And I told you what you told me, we'd never be in the same boat for free. Yet it rides